People have heard that we're allowed to shecht on Yom Tov, but it's lav dafka pashut. Not every animal that you see out there in the world are you allowed to just grab and shecht, because maybe it's muktzah. And not every animal that you own are you allowed to just grab and shecht on Yom Tov, because maybe it's muktzah. An animal I own can be muktzah on Yom Tov? Yes, under certain circumstances, and that is exactly the topic of the final Mishnah in the Masechta. It says, Ein mashkin v'sheichatin es hamid bariyos, that we do not give liquids to range animals and then shecht them on Yom Tov. Aval mashkin v'sheichatin es habayasos. However, we are allowed to give liquids to domesticated animals and then shecht them on Yom Tov. Eluhen bayasos, and which animals are considered domesticated? Halinois be'ir, those that sleep in the city. Midbariois halinois be'afar, while range animals are those that sleep in the pasture. So the Gemara wants to know right away, Lama li lameimar mashkin v'sheichatin. Why does the Mishnah say the part about mashkin, giving the liquids and then shechting? If you want to teach me a din about muktzah, just say, hey, some of your animals that you own might nonetheless be muktzah on Yom Tov, so you can't shech them. What's up with the beverages? And the Gemara answers, Milsa agav urcha kamash malan, that the Mishnah is teaching us something on the side, in addition to the din about muktzah. The lashaki inish behemtoi, that a person should feed beverages to his animal, v'hadar l'shachait, and then shecht, mishum sircha de mishcha, because of the adhesion of skin. In other words, if you're shechting on Yom Tov, it's ostensibly in order to have a meal that day. So you're going to have to remove the entrails, and you're going to have to remove the chalev, and you're going to have to remove the blood, and you're going to have to skin the animal. And that last step, skinning the animal, or maybe first step, I don't know, but that step is going to be much easier if you've just given the animal a bunch of liquids, and that's what the Mishnah is trying to teach us on the side. So back to the flow, the Gemara continues by citing a related brisa. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Elu hen midbarios ve'elu hen bayasos. These are our range animals, and these are domesticated animals. Midbarios kol shiyatzais bePesach v'ra'is be'afar. Range animals are those that go out at the time of Pesach and graze in the pasture. V'nichnais b'revir rishoina, and only come back in the first quarter. The first quarter is the beginning of the rainy season, Mar Cheshvan. Ve'elu hein bayasos, right now, in other words, be'ashkacha pratit. Ve'elu hen bayasos, and which are the domesticated animals? This is the Brisa speaking. Kol shiyotzaos v'ra'os b'chutz l'tchum, all those that go out and pasture outside of the tchum, ubaos v'linos b'tocha tchum, and come in and sleep inside the tchum. So Ladas Rabim in this brisa, the range animals are those that basically spend the summer out there in the wilderness and then come in around Mar Cheshvan, while domesticated animals are those that sleep inside the tchum. They can be out in the wilderness all day long doing whatever they want, but at night they come inside the tchum. They don't have to be on your property. They don't even have to be in the city. Just inside the tchum, that's already a domesticated animal, l'das rabim. And then along comes Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and he says, Elu ve'elu bayasois hein. All of these are domesticated animals in truth. So then really, what is the definition of a range animal, according to Rebbe? He says, Kol shiyutzaos v'ra'os be'afar, all those that go out and pasture in and graze in the pasture, ve'ein nichnasais lishuv, and don't come back, lo b'yamos hachama, not in the summer, v'lo b'yamos shamim, and not in the winter. That, according to Rebbe, is the definition of midbariyos. And then the Gemara is going to raise a challenge to that, or have a question at least. Umi islay l'Rebbe muktzah. And who says that Rebbe holds of muktzah? In other words, the premise of the question is, Rebbe is the Talmid of Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon is the opinion in Masechet Shabbos that stands for a limited application of the law of muktzah. So ostensibly, Rebbe should have a similar opinion to his teacher, Reb Shimon, and if he does indeed have a similar opinion, then he should hold that all of the animals are not muktzah, like Reb Shimon would. If he holds all of the animals are not muktzah, then why is he providing a definition? Why is he suggesting a definition of midbarios, of range animals? If he's suggesting a definition of midbarios, it l'cha'ura implies that he's agreeing to the concept that there's some category of animal that a person could own that nonetheless is muktzah for that person on Yom Tov. So which is it? Does he hold like Reb Shimon, or does he hold that maybe the animals that are your property might be muktzah on Yom Tov? Which one? Can't be both. L'cha'ura. Or at least that's the premise of the Gemara's kasha. So to substantiate the kasha, the Gemara says, "V'haba minei Reb Shimon bar Rebbe mi Rebbe." That Reb Shimon bar Rebbe, the son of Rebbe, brought a question in front of Rebbe. What was his question? His question was, "Patzilei Tamara l'Reb Shimon mahu." Unripened dates, according to Reb Shimon, your teacher, what is their halachic status? Are they muktzah on Yom Tov, or may I eat them? And he answers him, Rebbe says to his son, Reb Shimon bar Rebbe, Ein muktzah l'Reb Shimon ele grogeres v'tzamukin belavad, that according to Reb Shimon, there's no muktzah other than dates, figs and raisins exclusively. And what he means by that is that figs and raisins have this quality that when you harvest them, they're initially ready for eating. And when you fully dry them out, they're ready for eating. But when they're on their way toward becoming dried out, they are temporarily not fit or ready for eating. So the case that he's with which he's answering his son to inform him about the shita of Reb Shimon, the case that he's telling him about is the case of someone who has figs or raisins well before Yom Tov, and they're recently harvested, perfectly edible, and this Chacham decides, I want to begin the process of drying out my figs and or raisins, knowing that when Yom Tov comes in, by Ben Shmashos, that his figs and or raisins are going to be only halfway dried out and they're not going to be readied. So in this case, Reb Shimon would acknowledge that those figs and or raisins are muktzah because the person did an action that he knew or should have known would take a fully readied product and make it become unreadied and be unreadied as of the time of Ben Shmashos. In such a case, there's muktzah, Reb Shimon. But other than that, no. So you, my son, with the unripened dates, they're unripened, but first of all, maybe they're a little bit edible already. And secondly, there's nothing that you did to intentionally make them unreadied. So no, Reb Shimon, there's no muktzah here. But the problem is, if it's true that Rebbe holds like Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon would say there's no muktzah by the animals, then why is Rebbe proffering definitions of midbarios? So the Gemara is going to try on three potential reasons, and the third one is what's going to stick. The first reason, if you prefer, say, Hani nami kigrogeres v'tzumukin dami. That if you want, you could say that the animals that Rebbe is calling midbarios, that those are kind of similar to the case of the figs and the raisins. Just like by the figs and the raisins, the person is taking an action that he knows or should have known is going to take a readied product and cause it to become unreadied by Banish Mashais. So too, by the case of the animals, the person who bought them in the market sends them out into the wild, even if only one time. He knows or should have known that that's going to cause them to go from a state of readiness to unreadiness, and so they're muktzah to him. Iboy Sema. That's number one. Iboy Sema number two. Ema l'divarav de Reb Shimon ka'amar v'lei loi sviralei. If you prefer, you could say that when Rebbe was answering his son, he answered him according to the words of Reb Shimon, because his son specifically asked him, "Hey, according to Reb Shimon, what's the halakha here?" So he answered him according to Reb Shimon. But Rebbe himself did not hold of this opinion. That's Iboy Sema number two. And Iboy Sema number three is l'divrehem de Rabbanan ke'amar luhu, that when Rebbe was talking to his son, he was speaking from his perspective. But when Rebbe was talking to his colleagues, he was speaking from their perspective. Lididi ein muktzah. According to my shita, there's no muktzah here at all. Ela lididchu, however, according to your shita, which is Rabbi Yehuda, oidu li mihas, admit to me at least the following. Mihecha dietzois v'ra'os bepesach, that those animals that go out and graze in the pasture, by Pesach, v'nichnasois b'revia rishona debayasosen, that they are properly categorized as domesticated animals. Admit to me at least that. And the Chachamim say, absolutely not. Even those are considered range animals. So before we make the Hadran, I want to just illuminate the Penimius Ha'inyanim by reading some words of the Rebbe from a Farbrengen on Chaf Daled Teves, Tafshin Yud Beis. The Rebbe said, and it's written in Torah's Menachem, Hasimin HaKaveya as a chiluch bein midbarios u bayasos, that the sign that is set to distinguish between range animals and domesticated animals, hu makoim linasan shel habehemos, is the place where the behemos sleep. That's the key. Ima behema lina b'midbar, if an animal sleeps out there in the wild, hareze mehave siman sheshayeches lebehemos midbariyos. Behold, this is a sign that it's properly categorized as a range animal. She'ena lehen balabayis, because it does not recognize upon itself any kind of master. Aval behema kazu shechayzeres liloin. However, even an animal such as this that returns to sleep, kishemechashi chayoim, when the day becomes dark, b'toicha tchum, and the animals inside the tchum, even only a single time, shayeches lebehemois bayasois, it is properly categorized as a domesticated animal, sheyesh alehen balabayis, because now it has upon itself a balabus. V'digmaso benidoin didan, and the example well fits the rule. In other words, the Rebbe is saying that bayasos are animals that come home to sleep. Even if all day long, during the day, the animals are vildachaya, but epis at night, you say a little kriyas shema. There's at least a little moment in the day where you accept the balabatishkeit of something greater than the animal, which is the godly soul. And based on this, it's beautiful what's going on here at the end of the Masechta. Rabbeinu HaKadosh he's the Rebbe. And the question is, how does a Rebbe view a person whose animal soul is on fire? How should we view a person whose animal soul is on fire? Do we say that the person is muktzah? That they're set aside? Look at how Rebbe limits muktzah. He argues according to Rebbe Yehuda and according to Rebbe Shimon in an effort to limit the application of muktzah. He argues according to Rebbe Yehuda by saying that animals should be considered domesticated even if they spend all summer long out in the pasture, as long as they come in by Mar Cheshvan. In other words, the Nefesh Bahamis naturally acts up during the summer, but as long as a Yid leaves Tishrei with a renewed sense of Iskashrus to the Eibishter, they're already not in the category of Muktzah, L'Rebbe Yehuda. And he argues according to Rebbe Shimon by saying that even if the animal never comes home to sleep, not in the summer and not in the winter, as long as the animal is still living, it's not really muktzah, because there's always a chance that it could come back. There's always hope. Even that nefesh bahamis should not be set aside. The adarabah, it's got to be brought in with the avoda of hiskafia. But ultimately, there will be the success of hitapcha, and even the behema will be transformed to kedusha. And with this, we say, Hadran alach Mashilin, we shall return to you, chapter Mashilin, V'slikala Maseches Beitza. And tractate Beitza is concluded with the help of Hashem.